record button. There you go.
You are. I pressed the right button. I've never done that before. I'm very, that's a new achievement for this evening. Okay, folks, welcome to Bromley Three Faiths Group and our meeting tonight, 28th of June. My name's Andrew McClellan. I'm the chair and I'm the host for our meeting this evening. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you here, and a special welcome to our two very distinguished guest speakers who are going to be speaking to us on the topic of the Uighur crisis. I've checked already that my pronunciation of that name is correct or correct-ish. If you know better, then you can correct me later on. But that is how we understand it. And we've got two speakers tonight, both of whom are well aware of the crisis and also what kind of things need to be done about it. Each of them is going to speak for about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll have a brief changeover in the middle, and then at the end of our meeting, we should have some time for questions. We can invite questions from the floor. So as our speakers are giving their presentations, if questions occur to you, the best thing is just to make a note. Because of the nature of the Zoom format, it doesn't really lend itself to people interrupting in the middle. So we'll let our speakers each get to the end of their presentation, and then we'll take questions at that point. Our first speaker is Ikhlass Syed. He's the CEO of the charity called Lonely Orphans. The URL of their website is going in the chat right now, lonelyorphans.org. It's an organization which supports exiled Uyghur orphans and widows. He's got a background in support for persecuted minorities. He holds a master's degree in violence, conflict and development, and he's going to introduce our subject to us for this evening. So Ikhlass, you're very welcome to the Bromley Three Faiths Group, and we've been looking forward to what you've got to say. Over to you.
Thank you. Can I be heard? Right. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. It's I'm very grateful to be invited here and to talk about this important issue. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible because I mean when you look into the history of the Uyghur, it goes well over a millennia. And it's important to distinguish elements of their history to understand where they are. And obviously, it can be convenient when that history starts. So if I was to start the history of the Uyghur from post World War II, then you could see, the Chinese hegemony over the Xinjiang provinces is somewhat valid. Whereas if I was to start, a bit further afield, you'd see the very rich cultural history and attachment that the Uyghur ethnic group have. So without going too much into the detail, it's important to understand critical features about the Uyghur people. They are people who have roots from the Central Asia part of Mongolia, and therefore they share some cultural similarities with people or ethnic groups that have stemmed from there. And for a large portion, they were ruled by the Gokturks, and they're considered Turkic people. Their language is Turkic. It's very similar to those who speak it in Turkestan, Turkmenistan, in Turkey even, so people can understand what they say. And obviously, the being in the Xinjiang province of China, they're able to speak Mandarin as well to communicate with the state language. Now, given that they have such a rich background and culture, they've had quite a tumultuous history. You could say they've changed lands, literally they've migrated. As nomadic people of, from Mongolia, they were able to easily uproot in their entirety and move locations. So originally they were not based in the location that we recognize as Xinjiang. And then we'll explain how them being placed there geographically, how that impacted their, cultural identity, particularly their conversion to Islam, their exposure to other religions, and to what degree that they held on to other cultural roots or values. So it's important to understand that during that period where they did migrate, it was because of a kind of a Mongolian exodus, they call it, because of the Kyrgyz people from the Kyrgyz state had invaded into that location. And obviously they split into two. One group moved towards the Tibetans. They actually maintained their heritage, coming from like a Buddhist background. They ethnically look very similar to the Tibetans. They're actually known as the Yellow Uighurs, and the spelling is Uigurs. So you can look it up and see that group is still there, but they are predominantly from the Uyghur ethnic group. The other side, they stayed within the province that's known as the Xinjiang province, aka the front lines. That's what it was known as the frontiers from the Qing dynasty. So in that region, it was the kind of focus point of the Silk Road. So we know famously the Silk Road was a trade route that literally connected Europe to the Far East, that connected the Middle East to the Far East, and every culture, society, and civilization, and every eon you can imagine, they had direct interaction with this community. And as things changed, so did they. Culturally, and a key feature of that is their conversion to Islam. Now, it's important to highlight these things where I look at it, when I looked at the history, when I try to identify, because before I work with any groups, obviously my background being working with persecuted minority groups, there is a history of kind of identity that people have, that they hold on to, that create these sort of today's conflicts are based on a historical connection. In academia, we call these, sometimes they translate into ancient hatreds. So why one ethnic group will have a war today, but maybe 700 years ago or 1,000 years ago, their ethnic groups were actually rivals at one point. And it's important to highlight this because there was a time where the Uyghur Khaganate, it's almost their state or the empire that existed at that time in that region, did have a superior relationship with the Tang dynasty at the time. The Tang dynasty was a bit smaller, not as big as the Qing dynasty when they took over. So these are things that you can see the shift of power paradigms and how they impact different ethnic groups, and how they translate actually in the modern situation, and how some of the things that we will come across in the kind of oppression or repression that we see from the modern treatment of the Uyghur as almost unimaginable, and why they're so deep-rooted, and why they're so personalized, and why they're so intimate as well. So we'll go into aspects of that. But what I wanted to be clear on is why they have a Turkic kind of history or a relationship, why they almost have very similar cultural setups, even within their community, like how the grandfather would communicate with the younger, the male providers of the house, the roles of the gender roles, how all of these things are defined by a cultural connection with anyone that was from Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekis. They're very, very similar. And of course, the other aspect and the feature that is under attack in this context is their religion, their faith. So we take all of these things into account, and then we look at today where we are. We're looking at a situation where political China had asserted its borders. It did face some threats from Russia because of it. I mean, when we study the Cold War, we imagine, oh, those are the red states. They normally, they're supposed to be buddies with each other, right? Like the communist states were supposed to be together against the capitalist states. But actually, something strange, especially with that region, happened, which was you had, during the Afghan war, you had the Chinese backing the Mujahideen against the Russians so that they could keep a hold of the Xinjiang province. And then at the same time, you had the Russians arming the Uyghurs to try to encourage them to have a, kind of assert their self-determination. And we've seen the results of the Soviet Union collapsing resulting to countries like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. And as these countries popped up, the call for the Uyghur to have their own state was also an important aspect. But before they asked for a modern state, which they wanted to call East Turkmenistan, there was a state that was established in that region. It was the Kashgaria. Kashgaria state actually was a Muslim state run in that region, but the Uyghurs didn't like it. So though they were sharing the same faith, the Uyghurs did not get along with a foreign power controlling them in that region. And also, it's an important note that I think it sometimes gets confused with how the Uyghur oppression is promoted. It's seen as, oh look, I can only speak particularly from the Muslim community, or when this is promoted, it's seen as the Chinese are repressing Islam or the religion Islam. They are repressing the religion, but they're repressing it for a particular minority here, because the Hui, who are an ethnic Chinese Muslim group, they're quite a large Muslim minority in China, they do not face the same type of repression. They're allowed to practice to a degree. It's because practicing Islam means something very different. One is an ethnic group that the Chinese find historically okay. They've had centuries of relationship with them. And the other one, it's an ethnic group that historically they never had it that easy, and it was quite difficult to include them into 50-something ethnic minorities that they do accept or recognize within the Chinese state. And it's important to understand that a country such as as big as China, having only 50-something recognized minorities, it's a big problem in and of itself, because there's you see other geographical countries within the geographical parameters, they have hundreds of different nations and ethnic groups or languages that they even recognize. The borough of Newham alone probably has more languages spoken and recognized in London than you would in the whole of China, right? So it's important to understand why all of these things have a part to play, and it all comes down to bringing it to the modern problem. The concept of something that Benedict Anderson once said, and it's a concept of nation building and nationalism, and that comes down to what you imagine, or you imagine the imagined community, or what you imagine your community to be, your political community. What within that nation parameters, what are the common factors that you identify with and say, you know what, you can wear a blue t-shirt, I can wear a pink t-shirt, but we're still the same community. We're still the same in the same thing. Like in the UK, where we're very tolerant of each other. The fact that we have a space such as this that we can speak with each other and all recognize to be from England and be able to communicate with each other in that way. You can't have that in other countries. Believe me, the imagined community concept is very, very different in different states. And one of those things I've seen myself firsthand is how those things are implemented, or that hegemony is encouraged. It's something that it would really, really shock you. I mean, one of the things that we recognize that the Uyghur people have suffered over the years have been very, very intrusive violations. They sound, like from a sci-fi film. There are Uyghur people who are from the Uyghur background must install an app into their phones that tracks all of their calls and their discussions. They must allow a Chinese official to live in their homes just to see if they're outwardly practicing their religion. They're forced to drink out. They're forced to do things that are opposite of their religious teachings. And often, when the religion is under attack in this manner, and believe me, if it was a different faith, it'd be the same issue. It's not just a Muslim issue. If it was Christians, it would have been the same level of violation. We've seen this happen in Myanmar. We've seen it happen with the Karen people and different regions, different issues. But here, it happens to be the Muslims because the Uyghur, their religion is Islam. So it's important for us, even when I speak to Muslims or when I speak to everyone else, that we do recognize, yes, there's the Muslim element to it. Yes, there's the Islam under attack, but it's not just it's a human issue. And that's amplified by the fact that the Uighur Muslims are not oppressed in that same way. If I was to travel there as a Muslim, I'd be able to outwardly practice my faith. This is an attack on that people and that population and that community, and it's only to encourage what they imagine their community should look like. And those who reside or are part of their society or community should behave like. There is an active, we know there is it's estimated up to 3 million, but let's take the lower number. It's confirmed 1 million people are in these internment camps that have been newly built in the past years. Now, how were they able to suddenly increase their efforts in doing this? And why weren't they doing it? Why was there a slow approach to it? It's because, unfortunately, around the world, there is an amazing a kind of a universal excuse that you can do what you like. Basically, it's basically when you repress a group of people, some people misbehave, and there are unfortunately groups that have reacted violently to the repression, and that translates as there's terrorist activities. We need to fix it. So they added more surveillance, more police, and literally everyday people have had their lives just turned on its head. They have literally destroyed over 5,000 mosques. Some of these mosques were dated back from the medieval times, from the Silk Road era. So they've completely demolished and changed up the landscape. They've completely taken a lot of the key components or propagators of their faith into these internment camps to try and re-educate them and try and get them to engage in another life. It's because one of the other features I imagine when I see these people, one of the reasons why people can't let go of their faith. Faith is one of those things where you believe in it so much that you think, okay, life before faith. Like everybody has this understanding that they have this imagination that they will hold on to their faith. That's the last thing that goes, right? Like you can take every part of me, but not my faith. So if you change this, if you dismantle this, and if you change the DNA of this, then you've really have taken someone's, not only their culture, you've taken away their faith. You've attacked something that they've that private conversation that they have with God. The Chinese state wants to be in on that. It wants to be there. It's surveilling this. It's documenting this. It's living with them to observe their private prayer space. So it's really, really important to understand how intrusive these actions that the state is doing. The other thing that I take with a pinch of salt, and I'm fully aware that some of the when it comes to the advocacy and the campaigning stuff, why is it a big issue in the West now? And it's something that if you look left or right, if you've heard about the Uyghurs, you're hearing more and more about it. It's being almost kind of an encouraged advocacy. It is because there is a proxy, political paradigm that also takes place. So we know that the agenda is different because the oppression might be the same somewhere else, but different backers. I wanted to highlight more personal interaction as well. I don't know what where I'm supposed to be looking out for time. I'm just keeping an eye on Andrew's, if he's telling me, any time, just let me know.
That's about 5 more minutes.
All right, okay. So,
thank you.
So to kind of bring it to the reality of the situation with some of the families that we've been interacting with, some of those people and the personal stories, like Lonely Orphans and the work that we've been doing in Istanbul, in Turkey, there was a significant group of refugees there. They are supported by the Turkish people, but not so loudly, because I think because of the Syria crisis, they don't want to invite more refugees. So they're helping them a bit under the table, if you like. So they are supporting them with some housing and taking care of them in that way. Well, some of the stories that we've heard were, one woman, I remember she told us, having escaped one of these internment camps, she managed to get out. She was babysitting her neighbor's children. And there was about 4 children that was left with her. And her neighbor said, look, I'm just going back into China to get my parents out and I'll be back. She hasn't been back for a couple of years now. So you have people going missing immediately like that. So there are children, unaccompanied children, left with people who are supposed to just babysit them for temporary. And this is one of the reasons why we step in, and some of the work that we do is we've established, I don't know if you know what a Montessori school is. It's a very nice nursery type of school. It's very playful and engaging. So we have a nursery that's established for these orphan children. We're also looking to build, like a kind of empowerment center for the women, because a lot of the men are missing. The men are not in the equation. All of them are in the internment camps. Some of them are considered dead. It's been over 5 years. Some of them are, the women are still hopeful that they'll come back. But this is the kind of situation of the exiled community that we've met and interacted with in Turkey. It's unfortunate that we're having to talk about these sort of situations today, and so close to home as well. Turkey's not far away. And it's something that I think it's important for all of us to highlight, not just this case, but many other cases, but this is something that's happening right now and in this aggressive manner, and not many people know how to help them. Because honestly, we tried to help in so many different ways. Of course, we tried the China route. There was zero scope in doing that. We even tried to get in touch with some Uyghur community. There was a restaurant in North London. We tried to communicate with some Uyghur expatriates living here and see if we can kind of connect through families or anything like that. They did not want to talk. They couldn't talk. Someone sent a piece of paper and said, "Look, our phones are being monitored." In the UK, that's the level. It's at our doorstep, if you want to put it that way. And it's important that they can't carry their own message for them, and it's important that we somehow take some of that mantle on us and try and get that across. I hope I was able to share some valuable things, and obviously any specific questions, I'm here till then as well, so I'd be happy to answer as well. Forgive me if I've been all over the place, and I've just tried to guys give you a snapshot of something very big in this short time. I hope it's been beneficial.
Thank you so much, Ikhlass. I know we're all muted, but I suspect we'll all want to give you a round of applause at this halfway point. We're going to have an opportunity later on to put questions to both our speakers. But Ikhlass, you've given us a tremendous introduction to the issue, and it wasn't all over the place at all. It was there were loads of gems to pick up there, and I love the fact that you gave a historical context going back over centuries and centuries, which certainly was something that I was completely unaware of. Maybe others were too. Ancient hatreds between rival ethnic groups as being some of the background to this. But then you brought us right up to date, obviously, and talked about the religious persecution in particular and what's going on. And then just as you said, the problem on our doorstep with even Uyghur minority people living in the UK being afraid to speak and to put their own case. So thank you very much indeed. And we will come back to you in the question time. But first of all, we're going to hear from our second speaker, and I'm going to introduce her. While I'm doing that, Sophie, are you able, or I don't know whether Rebecca yourself, are you going to put your slides on the screen? Our second speaker is Rebecca Tinsley. She's a human rights activist and a former BBC reporter. She founded a website, wagingpeace.info, to support Sudanese refugees arriving in the UK, escaping the genocide in Darfur, a topic on which she later wrote a novel called Darfur When the Stars Fall to Earth, which has been translated into Arabic, as well as being available in English. She founded the website networkforafrica.org, which provides psychotherapy counselling training in conflict zones such as Rwanda and Uganda and Sierra Leone. She's also worked in Iraq with the persecuted Yazidi minority. She writes for a range of well-respected publications, including The Telegraph, The New Statesman, The Independent Catholic News, The Spectator, and various African websites. And I'm putting in the chat now the link to her own website, which I was looking at earlier on today, and as well as networkforafrica.org. So Rebecca, we're thrilled to have you as well, not just one, but two excellent speakers this evening. And over to you.
Thank you so much. It really is an honor to be asked to participate in this. And thank you to Ikhlass for his comments. Sophie, I am indebted to you for being in charge of the PowerPoint. If we could have the first slide, please. While Sophie is working that out, I am hoping to talk a little bit about the geopolitics of the situation. It is partly, of course, rooted in how modern China sees itself, and indeed the position of the Chinese Communist Party, which turns 100 on Wednesday. Modern China under President Xi projects its image as one of greatness and economic greatness and world domination. And increasingly under President Xi, it has been moving beyond that into what it calls warrior wolf diplomacy. And we're getting a much more aggressive tone from Chinese diplomats than we used to. They always rather hypocritically used to say, we don't interfere with other people's, other countries' internal affairs, which was actually not true because they were busy propping up North Korea and Myanmar, and of course the former Islamist and genocidal regime in Sudan. But be that as it may, there has been a real change in the way President Xi presents modern China to the world. But I would argue that actually it's rather a fragile society and a paranoid society, and it is terrified of dissent in any form, which is one of the reasons why, for instance, they persecute the millions of Christians and Buddhists and Tibetans. The paranoia of the Communist Party in China manifests itself as demanding ideological conformity. If you go back to the 1980s, of course, Deng Xiaoping brought in capitalism with Chinese characteristics, as he called it. And it was a kind of a social contract that he would allow wealth, prosperity, economic growth in exchange for people not having freedom of speech or democracy. And that was all very well. Sorry, Sophia, are you having trouble with the...
No, can you see the screen? Because
no, I
I'm now
can't.
screen sharing.
No, I can't.
I'm on screen, I'm on, can everybody else? Andrew, can you see the map?
Yes, we can see it.
Great.
And I think if you press
Okay.
the green, sorry, Rebecca, just to cut across you. So if you press the green play button at the top right, I think that will get us the view that we need.
Okie dokie. Just
I'm afraid I can't see anything. So if you can let me know when you've got that going.
So if you move to your right on the taskbar, you see that big like play button on the right, far right side on the slideshow. It's like a triangle, green triangle. Go right, go right, go right. Stop. There where this is play. Now go back again. Now up, up, up slowly. It's there, press.
Here's some music while you wait.
Do you want me to continue?
Hold on, Rebecca. Let's just make sure we've got your slides up. Because just give us one moment to get that sorted.
Well, the other, I mean, if you want the full screen, if you do the if you look at bottom left, there's a 3 buttons bottom left. If you click the icon third from the left, bottom right of the bottom left, that will give you a full screen. Does that make sense?
I'm doing it now. Thanks, Raz. You should see a full screen.
Yeah, so if you go to bottom left, look at bottom left, there's
Yeah.
three icons.
Yeah.
Bottom left. third from the left.
Third from the left.
Right, bottom left of the screen.
Yeah.
So if you, right at the bottom left of the taskbar, so you should see 3 icons right at the bottom left.
Yeah.
You could click the third icon from the left. It looks like a computer screen, the icon.
Yeah, I've got it.
Just click on that. That should give you a full screen.
It's on full screen on my desktop.
Right, because I'm not seeing full screen.
Oh, really? I've got full screen on my desktop. Let me just try again.
Sophie, are you presenting onto, is it from a laptop to a desktop? Or is it just a desktop?
This is a desktop.
Oh, okay. Is this your Apple?
Yeah.
Oh.
I can see everything, but the thing is you guys can't.
Sophie, can I butt in here? If you stop your screen share and then reshare it, making sure that the screen you're sharing is the presentation view.
Okay.
That's it. Rebecca,
Yes.
you can resume.
Okay. On that first slide, you see the Uyghur area of Xinjiang, and now that is just to give you a sense of context. That is 4 times the size of Germany, so it's a vast area. The other thing to notice is that its strategic position. Some of you will have heard of the Chinese Communist Party's program called the Belt and Road Initiative. And it is an attempt to link China by road, rail, and sea to export markets, and so that it can access resources that it needs to continue its phenomenal economic growth. Basically, that Belt and Road has to go through Xinjiang. And that is one of the reasons that they intend, that the Communist Party and President Xi are so intent in, as they might see it, stamping down on any dissent and having utter conformity from the Uyghur people. It is about economics as well as anything else. They are also paying Han Chinese people to move into Xinjiang to try to dilute the concentration of the Muslim people living there, the Turkic people living there. Now, President Xi, I mentioned that I think at the heart of it, there is a belief that the Chinese Communist Party's grip on China is actually quite fragile, because he walks a line between fearing stagnation of the economy will lead to civil unrest, and also fearing that too much economic growth will lead to chaos. And this is one of the things that feeds in, I believe, to the way in which he is reacting to the people of Xinjiang. However, that deal I talked about with Deng Xiaoping, the social contract, I will give you prosperity as long as you don't ask for democracy. It is unraveling, partly because there is growing inequality among the Han Chinese. And there are protests all over China all the time about pollution, about food safety, about corruption, about planning decisions. I have traveled around China on 3 occasions, and I've seen these demonstrations. Now, from my point of view, the good news is that President Xi, I believe, is overplaying his hand now. He's having to row back on this aggressive foreign policy attitude through his wolf warrior diplomats. And he's revealing himself. He's actually made China appear to be not just an economic competitor, but now a security risk. And this, of course, means that the rest of the world is beginning to perceive China not just as an economic competitor, but as a security risk. And this, I think, is a kind of, this is an unintended consequence for Xi. Here's an example of the effect it's having. After 7 years of the European Union negotiating a trade deal with China, the European Parliament is now refusing to ratify that trade deal. partly because of what's happening to the Uyghurs, but also because of China's threatening behavior in the South China Sea and its threats towards Taiwan. So it is a sign that and what I'll talk about later is the consumer-facing leverage that we have, the leverage we have over consumer-facing companies who are involved in Xinjiang. Sophie, if we could have the next map, please. This map shows internment sites in Xinjiang. There are 380 internment sites, which of course the Communist Party tells us are re-education centers. Of those 380, 135 of them have factories attached. And again, this goes to part of the story. It is about economics. It's about, well, forced labor, slave labor. It is about the fact that vast amounts of cotton come from Xinjiang. And incidentally, this is what you're looking at is the largest detention of a religious group since World War II and the Nazis. So if we could have the next slide, please. This is the re-education, the brainwashing, systematic rape and abuse of people and forcing people to learn Mandarin and swear allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party and profound love of President Xi. Talk about the cult of the personality. If we could have the next slide, please. When a British journalist asked the Chinese ambassador about these photographs of people, Uyghurs being herded onto buses and trains to take them to factories where they're expected to work for no money at all, the Chinese ambassador said, "Oh, we're taking them on holiday." If we could have the next slide, please, Sophie. Just to mention that the birth rate among the Uyghur people is down 49%. This is deliberate. This is part of the destruction of this group as an ethnic group. And it is estimated that 250,000 children have now been separated from a parent. You think about the consequences of that. And yet another slide, please, Sophie. One thing to mention is that Uyghurs are being pursued even as they go overseas. They are getting phone calls from the Chinese Communist Party threatening their families back home. And they're also pressing foreign governments to extradite Uyghurs back to face trial. Now, what's happening outside these camps? You'll find that Uyghur-owned shops are now padlocked and signs hung on them saying the owners have gone to college. And this goes along with the narrative of it being this being re-education, which is of course absolute nonsense. It's indoctrination. Every 100 meters in cities and towns in Xinjiang, there are facial recognition cameras. As Ikhlass mentioned, there are soldiers billeted on the homes of Uyghur people, watching their reactions. At police stations, they have cutting-edge artificial intelligence that will read the expressions and even analyze the way you walk to tell whether you are guilty or not. And of course, everybody's devices can be scanned. If we could have the next slide, please. And because I can't actually see the screen, I'm hoping that what this is showing you is of an aerial photo of a mosque. Is that right, Sophie?
Yes, that's right, Rebecca.
Okay. Now, Ikhlass mentioned a figure for the number of mosques that have been destroyed, but I have a different figure that I got from the Uyghur Human Rights Project. They say 16,000 mosques have been destroyed or damaged. There is no call to prayer. There are empty mosques. And 1,046 imams are in jail, some for up to terms of 15 years. I read somewhere that when foreign journalists go to the area, the Uyghurs will volunteer automatically, spontaneously, how keen they are on President Xi, because they're so absolutely terrified. And if you look at this film, you can see the vanishing of that mosque. If we could have the next slide, please. So how is China getting away with this? Well, they've got friends. They've got friends that support them. When several countries tried to put a motion through the UN Security Council censuring China for the way it is behaving towards the Uyghurs, believe it or not, 37 countries got together and wrote a letter saying how much they support President Xi's policy. Several of those countries are Muslim, and I'm so offended by this, I'm going to read out the names of these countries. Algeria, Bahrain, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Oman, Qatar, Sudan, Syria, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and the United Arab Emirates. They have all signed a letter saying, oh yeah, we understand what President Xi's doing in Xinjiang, you know, got to deal with that terrorism. They have friends all over the world, like the photo you're seeing of Mohammed bin Sultan of Saudi Arabia, because so many countries care about, they prioritize their trade and their economic connections more than they do, evidently, their Islamic faith. China also has its claws into 71 different countries for a total of $760 billion in debt. And for that debt, you will get no criticism of China about Taiwan, the South China Sea, Hong Kong, or the Uyghurs. In other words, China is buying the silence of most countries at the UN with this debt. Now, I could now talk to you for hours about the implications of all of these countries taking on debt from China, very often for projects that are not at all of any benefit to the people of those countries. And very often the people running those countries, first of all, they're bribed by the Chinese to go into economic relationships and sign deals and contracts. And secondly, they very often promise the Chinese access to their raw materials and resources at a knockdown price for sort of a 50-year contract. It's absolute madness. If we can have the next slide, please. This is the United Arab Emirates making nice with President Xi. Now you may ask, what about the United Nations? What about, you know, tragically, the Muslim world has been silent, largely silent over what is happening to the repression, the persecution of their co-religionists. What about the UN? The Security Council does absolutely nothing because both the Russians and the Chinese have a veto and will make sure that there's no resolution. However, you know, there is a precedent for having ad hoc tribunals. There was on Bosnia, there was on Rwanda, there's been one on the Yazidi. But if you can't get anywhere on the UN and the Security Council, and the tragedy is that diplomats, you know, you talk to British diplomats and say, why won't you put a motion forward? They say, oh, well, we won't actually get it through, therefore we'd lose face if we had to go up against Russia and China. At which point you have to ask, well, why are you there? Why bother? Anyway, you know, it is also possible to go through the UN General Assembly, trying to put forward a resolution to set up a mechanism to investigate and to prosecute what is happening in Xinjiang. But there's been no movement on that, again, because the Chinese are owed $760 billion by so many of these countries, and they have bought their silence, which finally takes us to the UN Human Rights Council. You know, they could appoint a special rapporteur, but instead they do absolutely nothing. Now, inevitably, China would attack the West for our double standards. They'll say, how dare you talk about what we're doing, what you allege that we're doing in Xinjiang. But the truth is they're going to attack us anyway. So my argument would be, why don't we at least stand up for the rights of these people who are being, who are voiceless in Xinjiang? One interesting thing to throw into the mix here is, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but President Biden is at the moment sort of subtly trying to draw a bit closer to Russia. Now, the reason we're told that he is doing this is that it is a way of freezing out China and putting pressure on China. One hopeful thing is that there are countries now that President Trump is out of the way, there are countries now realizing that if they work in partnership, there's a new sort of spirit of bipartisan working that has come in with President Biden. And that if those countries work in partnership, they can actually have an impact outside the world of the United Nations, since that is just so static. For instance, Holland, Germany, Canada are all now working together to prohibit some products and to apply sanctions on the people who are implicated in human rights abuses against the Uyghur people. Now that takes us to the United Kingdom. And let's be honest, the UK is rather schizophrenic on this. Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, has spoken quite forcefully about the horrors of what is happening to the people, the Uyghur people. But very recently, his trade minister, Lord Grimston, said, quote, "My ambition is to deepen trade links with China." China, just to put this in context, China owns approximately 135 billion worth of assets in the United Kingdom. Now, you might say, oh, well, this gives them power over us, but I would argue it's a double-edged sword, because if they did damage our economy, as they would inevitably threaten us with if we applied sanctions, they're also damaging the value of their assets in the UK. So I would argue that we should not be intimidated by their threats. If we could have the next slide, please. We do have leverage. There are consumer-facing companies like the slide you're looking at, and they are vulnerable to pressure from consumers. They are all, if we can have the next slide, please. This is another company that is, involved in, arguably, allegedly, using forced labor. And the effect of the intimidation of the Chinese Communist Party can be seen as follows. On the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, I tried to Google and get an image of the tank man from the Tiananmen Square massacre. And I was using Microsoft Bing. And all the images from Tiananmen Square had been replaced by holiday snaps of people having standing in Tiananmen Square, but not the tank man. Now, Microsoft Bing they said, oh, it was just a human error. But if you believe that, you'll believe anything. Apple have taken down 55,000 apps because they mentioned the word Taiwan. Now, that was because they don't want to offend the Chinese Communist Party. If we can have the next slide, please. Yet another company that is capable of being pressured. And remember, the Beijing Olympics, Winter Olympics, are going to be another opportunity where consumer pressure can be put on people, on companies, asking them not to advertise and not to sponsor. If we could have the next slide, please. I'm hoping this says Uyghur Tribunal, does it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, right. There's a remarkable man named Sir Geoffrey Nice, who is a lawyer, who is the man responsible for prosecuting Milosevic for what he did in Bosnia to the Muslims. And Geoffrey Nice is chairing a tribunal to take testimony. And so far he has 25,000 pages of testimony from Uyghurs, and he's got 50 lawyers working on the case. This to me is good news. He is basically saying, look at all the ways that China is violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For instance, Article 18, which guarantees freedom of religion and belief, Article 4, which is against slavery, and Article 23, which protects workers' rights. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I believe we can all do something about this. You know, we can feel angry, yes, but we can also do something. One of the things we can do is to write to our members of parliament asking that the Chinese Communist Party secretary for the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, a character called Chen Quanguo, can be sanctioned. Yes, the British government has sanctioned several individuals, but we should also be sanctioning this guy. If we could have the next slide, please. I'm giving you the addresses there of groups that, if you care about this issue and if you want more information, you can go on these websites and you can get practical things that you can do to put pressure on the UK government, but also on those companies that I showed you that are involved, that are in effect propping up the human rights abuses that are happening. They are complicit in the human rights abuses that are happening in Xinjiang. And finally, I'm hoping that if we get to the final slide, there were several addresses there that people can go to for more information and for action. I leave you with the question of whether or not this is a genocide. That is the definition of genocide. And at heart, I think there's a choice here for the United Kingdom. Do we prioritize money and our trade, or do we think about morality, ideals, values, and dare I say it, our soul? Thank you very much, and thank you to Sophie for your help.
Thank you very much indeed to Rebecca and to tremendous, two excellent presentations there back to back, and well done Sophie for getting the slides to work and for keeping up. Rebecca, I think we just missed the synchrony of your last bit with the genocide definition, so I'm going to suggest that we just keep that slide up for 1 minute while we all have a quick read through. Genocide: any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. Thank you. Sophie, I think if you'd like to end your screen share at that point so that we can see all the members of our group. Some of the links from Rebecca's slides to organisations I've just put into the chat so that you can just simply cut and paste those if you would like to follow those things up. Folks, the plan is that we will finish around about 9:15, which means we've got 10 minutes or so for questions. I know a number of people were noting things as as we heard from our two speakers. It's always slightly difficult to do this in the fairest possible way, but if someone would like to raise a hand physically, or if you've got one of those, a way of putting something in the corner of your screen, I've just done a thumbs up. There's no one for raising a hand as far as I can see, but if you indicate in some way that you'd like to ask a question, I will then invite you to say your questions, which can be for Ikhlass or for Rebecca, or for them both indeed. Or if you otherwise, if you want to put a question in the chat, I'll just pick up a few of the comments that have appeared there. Lots of reactions. I think Rebecca in particular, a number of us have reacted quite emotionally, understandably, to what you've said. So people saying food for thought, heartbreaking. Sadly, money is more important than morals. Food for thought, so sad. It's obvious that you believe in this very strongly. Yes, indeed. And someone put at one point, makes me think, what is the purpose of the UN? The actions of these rich Muslim leaders is deplorable. I think that's particularly because of the Muslims being the ones who are persecuted. And yet we saw those Saudi and UAE leaders involved there. Okay, Arma has raised his hand. Arma, get to your question.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you again, Rebecca and Ikhlass, for very informative presentations. I have a question for you each. So Rebecca, you're on the screen, so I'll ask you yours first. Is there anything we could do to put pressure on the Muslim countries which seem to have sort of stayed silent? I know you've mentioned lots of pressure groups that we can go to for UK sanctions, etc. But with regards to Muslim countries, is there any value in sort of tackling that?
That's an excellent question. Yes, there absolutely is. And I, at the risk of, anyway, I'll say it. I think it is much more powerful if the message comes from Muslims rather than people like me who are Christian. I have to tell you, the same thing happened during the slaughter in Darfur. It was absolutely impossible to get anyone in Muslim regimes, Muslim governments interested in the fact that Muslims were being killed in Darfur. And finally, somebody I know in Lebanon explained to me that the people in Darfur were the wrong kind of Muslim because they were Black. And I kind of wonder if there is something about the Uyghurs that means that they are the wrong kind of Muslim, quite apart from all the economic stuff which I mentioned. You know, it isn't for me to say. I just find the whole thing very distressing. But yes, please, an excellent idea to be lobbying and putting pressure on Muslim governments.
Thank you, Rebecca. And the second question was to Ikhlass. Ikhlass, I wondered if you could just sort of reiterate the part about the was it the indigenous Uyghur Muslims that are non-practicing versus the practicing Uyghurs elsewhere in China? I wasn't quite clear on that part.
Yeah, so there's an ethnic grouping. So the Uyghur are ethnically different from the Hui Muslim. So the ethnic Chinese are split into Han and Hui ethnic groupings, and the Hui are predominantly Muslim Chinese. So when we say Muslims in China, it's you're actually capturing a bigger, you know, there's several ethnic groupings, particularly the Hui and Uyghur. So the Uyghur are ethnically different from the Hui Chinese Muslims. And it's important to distinguish the two different communities. It's perceived, and it's not fair for me to say as a general statement whether they're practicing or not practicing, but it is perceived that the Hui Chinese have assimilated more into Chinese culture. And I mean, they drink alcohol, they have parties and stuff like that. You know, Chinese, you know, ethnic Mandarin Chinese people will tell you, you know, I've met a Hui and he doesn't fast or anything like that. So there's a very distinguished difference in how they practice their faith. So one of the things that characterizes the aggressive, you know, kind of repression of the practicing or the outward display of Islam with the Uyghurs is it's incorporated within their, you know, way of life, whereas in the other parts of China, you'd see it's almost a kind of a cultural attire that they, you know, oh yeah, Ramadan is here, or they would have different dishes on Eid Day, and so they would mark their faith in very different ways. So that you know, difference is there across the board.
Jazakallah khair. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Arma, for those couple of questions there. I'm looking for raised hands or other indications. There's a question that's come up in the chat, which I think relates to what you were saying, Ikhlass, about the Hui Muslims. Is it possible that they're hiding their faith because of the persecution that they face?
Yeah, I mean, I was just answering, yeah, it's definitely possible, or even the slow the steps that they're applying with the Uyghur, which is more aggressive, more, available to us, visible to us. You could say because of technology or because information is shared more widely. The repression the Hui faced started from the moment that they tried to, there was a revolt, the Dungan revolt, they call it, but years ago, where they established the Kashgaria state, actually, a Muslim state they carved out within China. And the Huis actually started that revolt. So from that, you can see preventative actions from that happening ever again did take place. And there was a concerted effort to re-educate. What we're seeing in these internment camps, it was widely done. There are stories of people who've had to teach the religion in secret. Very similar to, we would hear stories of the Spanish Inquisition, where buildings were built with very narrow corridors with bells on the doors. So when the Spanish inquisitors would step in, the bells would make the noise, and if they were in prayer, they'd have to break their prayers. So we knew they had secret compartments in the walls. One of the Uyghur elders, he described, he said, oh, this is not the first time. This happened, a couple of decades ago. And in those days, we used to hide the Quran into the wall when they would come in. We had our secret closet where we would teach the religion. So unfortunately, the repression did happen from kind of at state level many years ago, widely. But now this is focused, and perhaps, Rebecca highlighted it quite nicely, what the economic reasons would be in that particular region with that particular community.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, did you want to add something on that as well? Is that an area that you've looked into? No, that's great. Thank you, Ikhlass, for that. We've got from a couple more questions coming up in the chat, which I'll just read out regarding the Muslim support they have. If we as a combined effort stop visiting these Muslim countries who rely on tourism heavily on the economic front, that's a start. Humanity comes before anything. Could this possibly also be a land dispute? Rebecca, I'm going to throw this one to you. Where the Chinese government wants this area of land back due to it being rich in mineral resources, is that a possibility? Is that another part of the Chinese government's agenda?
I don't know enough about the mineral, whether there are minerals there or not. But what I do know is that they want to put high-speed rail links across and road across Xinjiang because of the Belt and Road Initiative, both so that they can export their goods to around the world and also so they can import resources, because what President Xi totally is focused on is keeping the economic machine going, because as long as he can keep prosperity going, he reckons he can hold at bay any civil unrest among the Han Chinese people. So that's his geopolitical reason for wanting to colonize Xinjiang.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Jan Pietro, who's new to the group this evening, has asked a question about Uyghurs in UK having their phones tapped. Does it happen with the involvement of the UK phone providers? Rebecca, I don't know whether this is something that you've looked into or otherwise. Ikhlass, do you know?
I know when I think in 2013 we tried to start a advocacy campaign called Help Uyghur. So we took the domain name and everything. And one of the things that we wanted to do was have the Uyghur community lead it from the UK. So when we first reached out to this, I think there's a restaurant that does Uyghur cuisine. So we assumed the Uyghur ethnic minorities who were running it, who had established themselves in the UK. So the first interaction was quite friendly and quite approachable. But we were being very naive. We didn't understand the levels of how far the reach. I mean, Rebecca mentioned this earlier. Like the Chinese state does actually reach out to extended families and people living in other countries overseas. And then the chef, one of the guys, received a call, and he said he looked white as a sheet and very scared, asked us to leave. I sent someone else a couple of weeks later to speak to them, and he said he'd receive a call discussing this stuff. So we really had to reevaluate our approach with how we did this advocacy. It was we can't really do a straight approach. We have to see who's confident in speaking, and then you had very different there's quite different approaches, different types of people we were speaking to, some more in the religious kind of angle, and they wanted to establish an Islamic kind of sultanate again. And then you have the others who just very nationalistic, that wanted to kind of re-establish the old East Turkmenistan kind of propaganda that they had as well.
To answer the question, I don't know the facts about the phone companies, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they are complicit and if they've been leaned on. What I do know, though, is that the British government needs to be pushed to re-examine quite a few Chinese investments in the UK, like, for instance, the fact that there are Confucius institutes at universities in the UK that really act like sort of spies, keeping an eye on Chinese students here to make sure that they don't raise issues that are inconvenient to the Chinese Communist Party. There are academics being paid by China. And we would be naive if we thought that those academics are going to work, free of constraint. I am actually going to find out about that phone company question. That's a really good one.
Thank you very much. Well, folks, that seems a pretty good note to end it on. We've given not only have we given our speakers a good hearing, we've also given them work to go and do. So, Rebecca and Ikhlass, go and do your homework. Apparently, that's the message of the Bromley Three Faiths Group. We're going to draw things to a close now, because I know that it's evening prayer for our Muslim friends in just a few minutes' time, and we want to make sure that you've got time to get ready for that. Can I say an enormous thank you to everyone who's joined us. We've had a number of people dipping in and out, probably as internet connections have wavered, but we've had between 40 and 50 people with us almost for the whole of the evening, which is a tremendous turnout. And Ikhlass and Rebecca, you have kept us absolutely wrapped. Our concentration has not wavered at all, because what you've said has been very, very exciting. It is very sad in lots of ways, but it is exciting to know that you are taking this very seriously, and many other people are wanting to relieve the suffering of our neighbours across the seas. And you've given us some practical pointers for things we can do, which is very helpful. And I'm going to encourage everyone to follow up on those as you are able to. Looking ahead, Bromley Three Faiths Group, our next meeting is in just a couple of weeks' time, Wednesday the 14th of July. It's a roundtable discussion meeting on environmental questions. Specifically, the question is asked, how can our faith in the Creator God be reflected in our concern for his world? And we'd love to hear contributions from a good number of people on that. So come along, listen in, bring your thoughts and reflections, and we'd love to have a good discussion there. We're still inviting people to tell us about your what you'd like us to do looking further ahead. At the moment, people seem to be saying that a mixture of virtual and live events, when live events are permitted again, would be good, because sometimes these Zoom meetings enable people to join us who otherwise wouldn't. But we definitely have to have some face-to-face meetings, because the cakes at the mosque and at the synagogue are just fantastic, and I have been missing them very much. Sorry, did I say all that out loud? Well, you know where I'm coming from on this. Friends, thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to say that the new website is just about ready to go. We've got a few little updates to make to our draft. I will send out details of that when I send the reminder for our 14th of July meeting, which I hope is in your diaries already. Once again, huge thanks to Rebecca and Ikhlass. Shall we finish with a final round of applause for them, and a good night from me?
Matthew, sorry, can I just, hi, Matthew. Matthew?
Andrew.
Yes. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I'm not sure if everyone's involved in this 4th of July thank you day. So just thinking, are you doing something for that? It's been quite, it's been open on Facebook and it's quite, they want people to just say any thank yous, make small videos for the 4th of July. Have you heard about that?
Not really. Do you want to email you? I'm not sure why you're asking me particularly.
Oh, Matthew or Andrew or anyone, sort of anyone from all faiths. I have mentioned it to Umar. Maybe Umar can maybe send you guys the link
Okay,
or something.
thanks,
It's just
Ursula.
something, yeah, that's going on.
We'll pick that up between the steering group. If someone wants to drop a line round, we will.
Yeah,
we will look
definitely.
into that. I have a feeling 4th of July has been postponed in the same way that the lockdown has been extended. That may be the quick answer, but we will converse between us and we'll get back to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night and God bless you.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.